While her husband was preparing dinner, she received a message on his phone from one of his colleagues.
How
"I
could
miss you," she replied for him.
Oh
"Come
my
over.
God.
My wife isn't home tonight." When the doorbell rang and her husband opened it, his face turned pale. Don't miss Chapter 9. This will be one of the best story of your life. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories, your own family channel. May the Almighty wrap every woman in a protection so gentle it feels like heaven's own hands, and a strength so deep that no storm, no betrayal, no heartbreak can ever break her spirit. May your hearts be lifted, your burdens be eased, and your silent sacrifices, the ones nobody sees, be rewarded with blessings that come like rain after a long, dry season. I pray your nights become peaceful, your mornings begin with joy, and every step you take is guided by light. May your homes be filled with harmony, your children rise with honor, and your value be recognized in every corner of your life. For you are the backbone of families, the keepers of peace, the silent heroes who carry the world with grace. If your heart is true, like the video, if your love is real, right, I am with Mr. Peter. The doorbell's chime cut through the silence like a blade. Serena Alba stood in the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs, watching her husband's face drain of color as he reached for the door handle. She had orchestrated this moment with surgical precision, her fingers still tingling from typing that message on his phone. "Come over. My wife isn't home tonight." 3 simple lies that would unravel everything. Robert Pattinson pulled open the door, and there stood Jessica Diaz, dressed in a black cocktail dress that hugged every curve, a bottle of wine in one hand and anticipation written across her features. The anticipation died instantly. "Robert!" Jessica's voice cracked with confusion, her eyes darting between him and the hallway behind him, where Serena materialized like a ghost made flesh. "Hello, Jessica," Serena said, her voice unnaturally calm, the kind of calm that precedes hurricanes. "Please come inside. I've been waiting for you." Robert's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. His hands trembled as Jessica stepped backward, nearly dropping the wine. This isn't... Serena, I can explain." "Can you?" Serena moved past him, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor, wearing the same comfortable leggings and oversized sweater she'd worn all day, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked exactly like what Robert had always seen, an ordinary housewife, simple, uncomplicated, boring. "Because I'd very much like to hear that explanation, both of you. Come in, Jessica. Don't be rude." Jessica glanced at Robert, seeking guidance, finding only panic. Something in Serena's demeanor suggested that running would be worse. She stepped inside, and Serena closed the door with a quiet click that sounded like a cell locking. "Serena, please, let me..." Robert started, but Serena held up one hand. "Not yet," she said. "Jessica, you look lovely. That dress is Valentino, isn't it? From the spring collection?" She spoke in flawless Spanish, the words flowing like water, and Jessica's face registered shock. "You speak Spanish?" Jessica whispered in her native language. "Fluently," Serena replied in the same tongue before switching seamlessly to English. "I also speak French, Italian, Portuguese, Mandarin, German, and Arabic." "Robert, you look confused." "Yes, 7 languages. You never asked." Robert's face had gone from pale to grey. "Serena, what—" "Let's sit down," Serena interrupted, gesturing toward the living room as though she were hosting a dinner party rather than confronting her husband's mistress. "I've made coffee. We should all be comfortable for this conversation." The next 20 minutes unfolded with agonizing slowness. Serena poured coffee with steady hands, offered cream and sugar, and then sat across from them both with her own cup cradled in her palms. Jessica perched on the edge of the sofa, looking like she might bolt at any moment. Robert sat frozen, his coffee untouched, his eyes fixed on his wife as though seeing her for the first time. "I know everything," Serena began, her voice still carrying that eerie calm. "The hotel in September. The conference you supposedly attended but didn't, Robert. The late nights at the office that weren't actually at the office. Jessica, I know about your husband, about how bored you are in your marriage, about how my husband provided a convenient distraction. I know that you've been sleeping together for 6 months. Serena, Robert's voice broke. I'm not finished, she said, and something in her tone made him fall silent. What's fascinating to me isn't the affair itself. People cheat. It happens. What fascinates me is the why. She turned her gaze fully on Robert, and he flinched. You told Jessica I was boring, that I had no ambitions, that I was content being a housewife with no real interests beyond cooking your meals and doing your laundry, didn't you? Robert's silence was answer enough. The truth, Serena continued, setting down her coffee cup, is that I have a PhD in international economics from Cambridge University. I have an MBA from Harvard Business School. I've published 17 peer-reviewed papers under my maiden name. I speak 7 languages. I've lived in 12 countries. I've advised 3 heads of state on economic policy. Her voice remained steady, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. And I gave it all up to marry you, Robert, because I thought I'd finally found someone who would love me for who I am, not what I could do or what I could offer. The room seemed to tilt. Robert's face had gone from grey to green. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you've been married to a complete stranger, Serena said. A stranger who made herself small and quiet and simple because she thought that's what you needed. A stranger who watched you struggle with basic Spanish phrases for your work presentations and never offered to help because you never asked if she spoke the language. A stranger who read your amateur analysis of international markets and bit her tongue bloody to keep from correcting you because you seemed so proud of yourself. She stood, and both Robert and Jessica instinctively leaned back. Serena walked to the mantel and picked up their wedding photo, studying it with detached curiosity. I erased myself for you, she said softly, more to the photograph than to them. I made myself invisible. I learned your favorite foods and cooked them even though I hate cooking. I watched your boring television shows and pretended to enjoy them. I laughed at your mediocre jokes. I made myself smaller and smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the shape of what I thought you wanted. She set the photo down and turned to face them. And you still needed more. Serena, I didn't know. Robert stood, reaching for her. Don't touch me, she said, and he froze, mid-reach. You didn't know because you never asked. In 3 years of marriage, Robert, you never once asked me about my life before you, about my education, about my dreams, about who I really was. You were so enchanted by the idea of a devoted wife who existed solely to support you that you never bothered to learn that I was a person with my own history. I don't understand, Robert said, his voice barely above a whisper. Why would you hide all that? Because the last time I didn't hide it, the man I loved was only with me for my connections and my family's money, Serena said, and for the first time, her voice cracked slightly. Because I wanted someone to love me, not my resume. Because I was terrified that if you knew who I really was, you'd feel threatened or inadequate or intimidated, and clearly I was right to be afraid. She moved past them both, heading toward the stairs. Jessica, you should go home to your husband. Robert, we'll discuss the terms of our divorce through lawyers. I'm moving into the guest room tonight. You can have the house, the car, everything. I don't want any of it. It all reminds me of becoming small. Wait, Robert called after her, finally finding his voice. Serena, please, we need to talk about this. She paused on the 3rd step, her back still to them. When she spoke, her voice had shifted from calm to something colder, harder, more dangerous. No, Robert, we don't need to talk. You had 3 years to talk to me, to know me, to ask me questions. You chose not to. You chose to create a fantasy wife in your head and be disappointed when reality couldn't match your imagination, and then you chose to betray even that fantasy. She continued up the stairs without looking back, leaving Robert and Jessica sitting in the ruins of assumptions and lies. When she reached the guest room, Serena finally allowed herself to collapse against the closed door, her calm facade cracking into 1,000 pieces. She had lived through betrayal before, She had survived being used and discarded. But this confirmation that even when she made herself as simple and non-threatening as possible, she still wasn't enough. This might destroy her in ways Damian Whitmore never could. Serena pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. Her mother answered on the second ring. "I need to come home," Serena said, her voice finally breaking. "You were right. It didn't work. I'm ready to come home." Chapter 2. Unraveling. The sun rose on a house divided. Robert hadn't slept. He'd spent the entire night on the couch, his mind replaying Serena's words on an endless loop, each repetition revealing new layers of his own blindness. PhD from Cambridge, MBA from Harvard. 7 languages. Advised heads of state. The woman he'd dismissed as simple and uncomplicated had credentials that made his own bachelor's degree in business administration look like a participation trophy. Around dawn, he heard movement upstairs. Footsteps, the sound of drawers opening and closing. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like walking toward his own execution, and found the guest room door open. Serena stood before a suitcase he'd never seen before. Designer luggage in buttery leather that probably cost more than his monthly salary, filling it with clothes he didn't recognize. "Serena," he said from the doorway. She didn't turn. "You should shower and get ready for work. You'll be late." "I'm not going to work today." "Suit yourself." She folded a silk blouse with practiced precision, and Robert noticed her hands, really noticed them for the first time. No calluses, no rough edges, elegant fingers that moved with the efficiency of someone accustomed to expensive things. How had he never noticed? "Where did all these clothes come from?" he asked. "They've always been here, in the back of the closet you never opened, behind the winter coats you never helped me hang." She finally glanced at him, and Robert flinched at the coldness in her eyes. "I kept them just in case I ever needed to remember who I used to be. It appears I need that reminder now." Robert watched as she pulled out more items. A laptop he'd never seen, sleek and clearly high-end, covered in stickers from universities and conferences around the world. A leather portfolio embossed with initials he didn't recognize. SD, not SA, for Serena Alba. "SD?" he asked. "Serena Devereaux," she said. "My real name. Alba is my mother's maiden name, the one I took when I wanted to disappear from my old life." She pulled out a passport and tossed it onto the bed. "Look if you want. It's not like I have secrets anymore." Robert picked up the passport with trembling hands. The photo showed the same woman, but different somehow. Hair styled professionally, designer clothes. But it was the stamps that made his head spin. Paris, London, Tokyo, Geneva, Dubai, Sydney, Beijing. Page after page of entries and exits from countries around the world, evidence of a life he knew nothing about. "When was all this?" he whispered. "Before you," she said simply. "Before I decided to try being someone ordinary. Before I thought maybe someone could love me without wanting something from me." The doorbell rang, interrupting them. Serena checked her phone. "That will be the courier. I'm having some documents sent over." "What documents?" "From my lawyer, and from my family's estate attorney, and from the humanitarian organization I used to work for." She brushed past him, leaving behind a faint scent of expensive perfume he'd never smelled on her before. She'd always worn something light and unassuming. This was different. This was power and money and confidence. Robert followed her downstairs and watched as she signed for multiple packages. After the courier left, she opened them methodically at the dining table, spreading papers across the surface. He caught glimpses of letterheads, law firms with names that screamed prestige, universities, international organizations. "What is all this?" he asked again. "My life," Serena said, not looking up from a letter she was reading. "The life I paused to play house with you. My family's lawyers have been handling my affairs while I was away. Apparently, there are several matters requiring my immediate attention." "Your family?" Robert sat down across from her, uninvited. "You said your parents were dead." "No," Serena corrected, her voice clinical. You assumed they were dead because I never talked about them. I never corrected you because it was easier than explaining why the daughter of the Devereux dynasty was married to a marketing coordinator living in a modest house in the suburbs. Devereux, Robert repeated. The name tickled something in his memory. Wait, not the Devereux family. The ones who own one of the largest private equity firms in the country? Yes. Serena signed a document without reading it, her signature a flowing script that looked nothing like the simple Serena Alba she'd scrawled on their marriage certificate. The ones who have their name on hospital wings and university buildings and international foundations. Also, yes. My father is Philippe Devereux. My mother is Isabelle Devereux née Alba. I'm their only daughter. The room tilted. Robert gripped the edge of the table. You're one of those Devereux. Guilty. She finally looked up at him, and her expression was unreadable. Surprised? Horrified? Intimidated? All the things I was afraid you'd be if you knew the truth. Why didn't you tell me? His voice came out strangled. Because every time I mentioned anything related to my education or my past work, you changed the subject, Serena said. Because the one time I tried to help you with a presentation by offering a few suggestions, you accused me of making you feel incompetent. Because you seemed so much happier when I was just Serena the housewife that I learned to keep my mouth shut and my credentials hidden. That's not fair, isn't it? She gathered the papers into neat stacks. Let me tell you what's happened in the 18 hours since I caught you, Robert. I've had 3 phone calls from my mother, all of which I ignored until the last one. I've received an email from the executive director of the Devereux Foundation offering me a position I'd previously declined. I've had my lawyer draw up divorce papers with terms so generous to you that you'll think you've won the lottery, and I've booked a flight to Geneva for next week to meet with the board of an international organization about heading their new initiatives. Each statement hit Robert like a physical blow. Geneva? Switzerland, Robert, where the main office is located. They've been trying to recruit me for years, but I kept saying no because I was committed to making this marriage work. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I gave up opportunities that most people only dream about because I believed in us. How pathetic is that? Serena, please, don't. She stood, gathering the papers. I have calls to make, people to see, a life to resume. You should probably call Jessica and make sure she's okay. I assume that's still your priority. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, Robert. Her voice finally rose, cracking the ice. You want to know what's not fair? I gave you 3 years of my life. 3 years where I could have been myself, could have been using my education and my skills to make a difference in the world. Instead, I made pot roast and pretended not to understand the news in languages you don't speak and sat through your friends' boring dinner parties where they treated me like arm candy too dumb to follow the conversation. She advanced on him, and Robert backed up until he hit the wall. You want to know what's really not fair? I fell in love with you, the real, genuine, painful kind of love, and I thought maybe if I was perfect enough, simple enough, easy enough, you'd love me back the same way. But you didn't want me. You wanted a fantasy, and when that fantasy wasn't enough, you went looking for another one. Tears streamed down her face now, but her voice remained steady. So no, Robert, nothing about this is fair, but particularly not for me. She walked away, leaving him slumped against the wall, drowning in revelations he couldn't process. Upstairs, Robert heard her speaking in rapid French, her voice calm and professional, every inch the powerful woman she'd been hiding. He listened to her laugh at something the other person said, a genuine laugh he'd rarely heard from her, and felt something inside him shatter completely. He'd been married to an extraordinary woman and treated her like she was ordinary. He'd held a diamond and complained it wasn't shiny enough. He'd had everything and thrown it away for nothing, and now he was going to lose her forever, and he'd never even really known her at all. Chapter 3. The Real Reason. Isabelle Devereux arrived 3 days later in a car that cost more than Robert's house. He answered the door to find a woman in her 60s, elegant as a blade, dressed in Chanel and fury. She looked past him as though he were furniture, her eyes scanning for her daughter. "Where is Serena?" she demanded, her French accent sharp and precise. Upstairs, Robert said. You must be— I must be nothing to you, Isabel cut him off. You are beneath my notice, Serena. His wife appeared at the top of the stairs, and Robert's breath caught. She wore a tailored dress, her hair styled in soft waves, makeup applied with expert precision. She looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. She looked absolutely nothing like the woman he'd been married to. Mama, Serena said softly. We're leaving, Isabel announced. Pack whatever you need. I've had the rest of your things put into storage years ago. Everything that matters is already gone. Maman, please! No! Isabel finally turned her full attention to Robert, and he felt himself shrink under her gaze. This is the man? This is what you gave everything up for? Don't, Serena said, coming down the stairs. He didn't know. He didn't ask, Isabel corrected icily. There's a difference. She turned back to Robert. My daughter made herself invisible for you. Do you understand what that means? Do you comprehend what she sacrificed? Mrs. Devereux, You may not speak to me, Isabel said, her voice dripping contempt. You've done enough damage. Serena, darling, the car is waiting. Say goodbye to this place and let's go home. But Robert had found his voice, however shaky. I need to understand, he said. Serena told me about her past, about her education, but she didn't explain why she hid it all. Please, I need to understand what I did. What you did, Isabel laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You did what Damien Whitmore did. You took my daughter's light and snuffed it out. Who's Damien Whitmore? Tell him, Isabel said to Serena. He should know what lineage of failure he belongs to. Serena's face had gone pale, but she nodded slowly. She gestured to the living room. We should sit. They arranged themselves in a tense triangle. Serena in the chair she'd always occupied, Isabel on the sofa like a queen on a throne, Robert perched on the edge of the love seat, looking like a man awaiting execution. 5 years ago, Serena began, her voice carefully modulated, I was engaged to be married. Damien Whitmore came from a good family, old money, all the right connections. We met at a charity gala, and he was charming, educated, cultured, everything I'd been raised to expect in a partner. She paused, collecting herself. Robert wanted to reach for her hand, but knew he'd lost that right. We were together for 2 years. He proposed at my family's estate in front of everyone who mattered. It was perfect. I was ecstatic. I thought I'd found my person. Her hands tightened in her lap. Then, 3 months before the wedding, our head of security came to my father with evidence. Damien had been using his relationship with me to gain access to proprietary information. He'd been copying files, attending meetings he had no business being in, cultivating relationships with our board members. He was stealing intellectual property to start his own firm. Robert felt sick. But that wasn't even the worst part, Serena continued. The worst part was when my father confronted him and Damien laughed. He actually laughed. He said he'd never loved me. He said I was adequate company but essentially a means to an end. He said sleeping with me was the price of doing business, like I was some transaction he had to endure. Serena, he told me I was boring, she said, her voice finally breaking. He said I talked too much about work, that I was too intense, too ambitious, too much. He said any man who actually married me for love would be lying or insane. My daughter had a nervous breakdown, Isabel said coldly. She spent 6 months in a private facility recovering. When she finally emerged, she wanted nothing to do with her old life. She changed her name, moved across the country, and disappeared. We tried to bring her home, but she refused. She said she needed to know if someone could love her without knowing about the Devereux name or the money or the connections. So she found you, Isabel continued, her gaze boring into Robert, a perfectly average man with a perfectly average life. She made herself perfectly average to match. And you know what? She was happy. For the first time in years, my daughter called me and sounded genuinely happy. She said she'd found someone who loved her for herself. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Then 6 months ago, she stopped calling as often, Isabel said. She made excuses. She sounded tired, defeated, and now I know why. Because you, like Damien, couldn't handle who she really was. Damien wanted her money. You wanted her small. Both of you betrayed her. Both of you broke her. That's not, Robert started. Isn't it? Isabel's voice cut like a whip. Serena told me how you reacted when she tried to help with your work, how you shut down conversations when she mentioned anything intellectual, how you seemed most comfortable when she was cooking or cleaning or existing in your shadow. You weren't intimidated by who she was, Robert. You were threatened by it. So you diminished her, bit by bit, until she learned to diminish herself. I didn't mean to. No one ever means to, Isabel said. Damien didn't mean to break her heart. He just meant to use her. You didn't mean to make her feel worthless. You just meant to feel superior. The impact is the same. Robert looked at Serena, who sat perfectly still, tears streaming silently down her face. I'm not Damien, he said desperately. I didn't use you. I loved you. You loved an idea of me, Serena said softly. You loved the version I performed for you. The question is, Robert, if you'd known who I really was from the start, would you have even asked me out? Would you have pursued a woman with a PhD and a trust fund and credentials that outshine yours? Or would you have felt too intimidated to try? He wanted to say yes. He wanted to promise that he would have loved her anyway. But the honest answer stuck in his throat because he wasn't sure. He'd been attracted to Serena's devotion, her simplicity, her focus on him. If she'd been the powerful woman she really was, would he have seen her as a partner or a threat? The silence answered for him. That's what I thought, Serena said. She stood smoothing her dress. Maman, let's go. There's nothing left for me here. Wait, Robert said, standing as well. Please, give me a chance to make this right. How? Serena asked. How do you make this right, Robert? Do you want to try again? Try to love the real me? I don't think you're capable of it. I think you need someone to be smaller than you to feel like a man, and I'm done being small. That's not true, isn't it? Then tell me honestly, if I'd walked up to you at that coffee shop where we met and told you I had a PhD, would you have asked for my number? The question hung there, unanswerable. Goodbye, Robert, Serena said. Sign the divorce papers, take the settlement, move on with your life, find someone whose light doesn't threaten yours. Isabel stood, linking her arm through Serena's. Let's go home, darling. You've wasted enough time here. Robert watched them leave, watched them climb into that expensive car, watched it pull away from his modest house. He stood in the doorway long after they'd gone, feeling the weight of every assumption he'd made, every conversation he'd shut down, every time he'd made Serena feel like she was too much. He wasn't the villain in his own story. He'd never thought of himself as cruel or dismissive or threatened by powerful women, but Isabel's words echoed in his head. The impact is the same. It didn't matter what he'd meant to do. What mattered was what he'd actually done, and what he'd done was take an extraordinary woman and convince her she needed to be ordinary to deserve love. He'd done exactly what Damien had done, just in a different way. Damien had used Serena. Robert had diminished her. Both had left her broken. The difference was, Damien had never pretended to love her. Robert had believed his own lie. Chapter 4. The Unraveling of Robert Pattinson. Work became unbearable within a week. Robert sat in his cubicle, staring at his computer screen, unable to focus on the market analysis report he was supposed to be writing. The words blurred together, meaningless, because his mind kept replaying everything Serena had said. PhD from Cambridge, 7 languages, advised heads of state. And he'd dismissed her as simple. Pattinson, his supervisor called from across the office. Conference room, now. Robert followed, his stomach knotting. His supervisor, Harold Kent, waited inside with arms crossed. Close the door. Robert obeyed, dread pooling in his gut. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, Harold said. Is your wife Serena Devereux? The blood drained from Robert's face. How did you? So it's true. Harold sat heavily in a chair, running his hand through his thinning hair. Jesus Christ, Robert. I've been trying to get an introduction to the Devereux family for 5 years. 5 years. I've attended every charity gala, every business conference, hoping to network my way into their circle. And you've been married to Philippe Devereux's daughter this entire time. I didn't know, Robert said numbly. You didn't know. Harold's laugh was bitter. You were married to one of the most influential women in international business, and you didn't know. How is that even possible? She didn't tell me. Or you didn't ask, Harold said, and Robert flinched at the echo of Isabel's words. Do you have any idea what kind of doors she could have opened for this company? What kind of connections she has? The Devereux Foundation alone funds dozens of initiatives we've been trying to partner with for years. I never asked her for anything like that, Robert said defensively. That's not the point. Harold stood abruptly. The point is that you had access to opportunities that people spend entire careers trying to achieve, and you were too oblivious to even know it. Worse, from what I hear, you're getting divorced. Is that correct? Robert nodded miserably. Then I'm going to be blunt with you, Pattinson. The board is reconsidering your position here. They feel that someone who could be married to Serena Devereux and not recognize her value demonstrates a severe lack of judgment. That lack of judgment reflects poorly on this company. You're firing me because I didn't know my wife was rich. I'm reconsidering your future here because you married an extraordinary woman and treated her like she was ordinary, Harold corrected. Because you demonstrated the kind of blindness that concerns us about your analytical capabilities. If you can't see what's right in front of you at home, what are you missing here? That's not fair. Life rarely is. Harold moved toward the door. You're being passed over for the promotion to senior analyst. We're giving it to Davidson instead. I suggest you take this time to reflect on your priorities and your perceptions. You're dismissed. Robert returned to his cubicle in a daze. Around him, co-workers whispered. Word had spread. He caught fragments of conversation. Devereux daughter. Can you imagine? Must be an idiot. Cheated on her. With who? His phone buzzed. A text from his friend Trevor. Dude, is it true? Your wife is Serena Devereux. Why didn't you tell us? Another text from his brother. Mom just saw something on social media about your separation. She's freaking out. Call her. Another from Jessica. We need to talk. This is getting out of control. Robert ignored them all. Instead, he pulled up his browser and typed Serena Devereux into the search bar. The results flooded his screen. Photos from charity events, articles about her academic achievements, mentions of her work with international organizations. There was even a TED Talk she'd given 3 years ago about economic inequality, her presence on that stage so confident and commanding that Robert barely recognized her. He clicked on the video, watching his wife speak passionately about global markets and humanitarian work, switching effortlessly between English and French to make a point. The audience hung on her every word. She was magnetic, brilliant, powerful, and he'd made her feel like she needed to hide all of that to be loved. That evening, Robert finally called Jessica. They met at a neutral location, a coffee shop far from both their homes. She looked exhausted, her makeup unable to hide the dark circles under her eyes. My husband knows, she said without preamble. Someone saw the photos circulating online and sent them to him. We're separating. I'm sorry, Robert said automatically. Are you? Jessica laughed harshly. Because I'm not sure I am. You know what I realized, Robert? You were never special to me. Neither was what we had. I was bored in my marriage, and you were available. You represented escape, not love. I wasn't in love with you. I was in love with the idea of feeling something again, anything, and you happened to be convenient. Each word hit like a slap. You're saying it meant nothing? I'm saying it meant exactly what it was. Two people using each other to feel less empty. You weren't running toward me, Robert. You were running away from feeling inadequate with your wife. And I wasn't running toward you. I was running away from feeling invisible in my marriage. We were both just running. That's a pretty harsh assessment. It's an honest one, Jessica said. She stood, gathering her purse. I hope you figure yourself out, Robert, because I'm going to be honest with you about one more thing. If I'd known you were married to Serena Devereaux, I never would have slept with you. Do you know why? Because any man who has access to a woman like that and still looks elsewhere isn't looking for love or excitement. He's looking for someone to make him feel bigger than he is. And I don't have time to prop up someone else's ego anymore. She left, and Robert sat alone in the coffee shop, drowning in truths he didn't want to hear. That night, he started therapy, not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't live with himself otherwise. Dr. Helena Reeves, a clinical psychologist with kind eyes and an unflinching manner, listened to his story without judgment. "Tell me about your mother," she said after he'd finished recounting everything. "My mother?" Robert blinked. "What does she have to do with this?" "You tell me," Dr. Reeves said. "You mentioned she left when you were 12. How did that impact you?" The conversation that unfolded over the next hour stripped Robert bare. His mother had been a successful attorney, brilliant and driven. His father had been a mechanic, hard-working but simple. The power imbalance in their marriage had created tension that young Robert had absorbed without understanding. When his mother left for a partnership opportunity in another city, choosing career over family, it had shattered Robert's world. "I think," Dr. Reeves said gently, "you learned that powerful, ambitious women leave. You learned that if you can't match a woman's accomplishments, she'll eventually realize she's too good for you and go. So you sought out someone you thought was your equal, someone who wouldn't threaten you, someone who wouldn't leave because she needed you." "But Serena wasn't actually that person," Robert said slowly. "No," Dr. Reeves agreed. "She was exactly the kind of woman you were afraid of, hiding herself to make you comfortable. And when glimpses of her real self appeared, you felt that old fear resurface. So you sought validation elsewhere, with someone who made you feel adequate. You sabotaged your marriage before Serena could realize her mistake and leave you first." "That's—" Robert's voice broke. "That's horrible." "It's human," Dr. Reeves corrected. "Painful, yes. Destructive, absolutely. But human. The question now is, what are you going to do about it?" Robert went home that night and did something he'd never done before. He sat down with a journal and wrote honestly about his fears, his insecurities, his inadequacies. He wrote about watching his mother leave and deciding that powerful women weren't safe to love. He wrote about meeting Serena and being relieved that she seemed simple, easy, manageable. He wrote about every time he'd shut down her attempts to share her real self, every time he'd changed the subject when she tried to talk about her education, every time he'd made her feel like her intelligence was threatening rather than attractive. He filled pages with confessions that no one would ever read, excavating the ugly truths he'd buried under layers of self-deception. By the time he finished, dawn was breaking, and Robert felt simultaneously emptied and heavier, as though acknowledging the weight he'd been carrying had somehow made it more real. His phone buzzed with an email from his lawyer. The divorce papers had been filed. Serena was offering him the house, the car, and a settlement that would leave him financially comfortable for years. She wanted nothing except her freedom and her name back. Robert stared at the papers, at the generous terms, at the clear message. She wanted nothing from him. Not his things, not his money, not his time. She just wanted to erase this chapter of her life and move on. He couldn't sign them, not yet. Not because he thought he could fix this, but because signing them would mean accepting that he'd destroyed something irreplaceable through his own cowardice and insecurity. But not signing them wouldn't change anything either. Serena was done with him. She'd made that clear, and she had every right to be. Chapter 5. The photograph. The storage unit key appeared in his mailbox 2 weeks later with no note. Robert stared at it, recognizing Serena's handwriting on the small tag. Unit 247, Riverside Storage. He drove there immediately, not questioning why she'd sent it, knowing only that it was some form of communication, and he was desperate for any connection to her. The unit was small, packed with boxes labeled in neat script: books, research, clothes, personal. He pulled the first box toward him and opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them. Serena, at what looked like 18 or 19, standing on a stage receiving some kind of award. Serena, slightly older, dressed in business attire, shaking hands with people Robert vaguely recognized as world leaders. Serena laughing with a group of people at what appeared to be a university function, the caption on the back reading, Harvard MBA graduation. But it was one photo near the bottom that stopped his heart. Young Serena, maybe 20 years old, sitting at a conference table between two men Robert definitely recognized, international diplomats he'd seen on the news. She was gesturing at some document, her face animated, confident, alive in a way he'd never seen in person. She wasn't just present in that photo. She was commanding the space, clearly leading the discussion, radiating the kind of authority that came from genuine expertise. That woman had never existed in their marriage. Not once. Robert heard footsteps and turned to find Camille Devereaux, Serena's younger sister, standing in the entrance of the storage unit. She looked like a younger, sharper version of Serena, dressed in expensive casual clothes with her dark hair pulled into a high ponytail. "She told me to come check if you actually showed up," Camille said without preamble. "Interesting. I didn't think you would." "Why did she send me the key?" Robert asked. "Because she thought you should see who she really was," Camille said, "before she leaves." "Leaves? She's moving to Geneva, I know." "No," Camille interrupted. "Not to Geneva. Away from everything. She's taking a position with Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. She'll be gone for 2 years minimum, possibly longer, working in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. No stable address, no regular contact, just work." Robert felt the world tilt. Why would she do that? "Because you broke her," Camille said bluntly. "Because Damien broke her before you. Because she's done trying to be small and safe and lovable. She's decided that if she's going to be alone, she might as well do something meaningful with her solitude." She picked up the photograph Robert had been holding. This was at a UN summit. She was 20, the youngest policy advisor they'd ever had. Those men didn't want to listen to her because of her age, but by the end of that meeting, they'd adopted every single one of her recommendations. "She never told me," Robert whispered. "You never asked."